I'll be okay.
So, okay.
I'll be okay.
Um, you talked about the first of the two plays that I'm familiar with. First one being the relationship about intergenerational trauma, going back from breaking the relationship with the faiths, and the restoration of that through naming and being and resolving and healing. I know that your upcoming play that you've mentioned already, you said that you started with Twelfth Night, right? And followed back on Antonio, and then you implied that you had discovered a bunch of things about Antonio. I know for a fact that one of the things you discovered was yet another grove, another forest setting. And so I guess I wanted to ask you, in your conversation with getting to know Antonio, getting to know um, Twelfth Night's context, the unsaid parts of Twelfth Night, can you talk a little bit about that journey, about how you found a grove out of that, and also what your exploration and your running of these simulations, right? Because you're taking these little bits and running these ecosystem simulations from them. What have you learned about the nature of groves, culture, the destruction of those groves, the repair of those groves? Like what's coming up as you start to simulate those things as an
Wow.
expert story simulator of ecosystem human relationships?
So you're generous. Well, I fair play. Okay, so the simple truth, like anything, any art, I believe a synthesis, right, of everything that individual artist or whatever the group of people surrounding that artist is. The artist is synthesizing through their body their experience of life and what they're learning. And that's very much the same for me, especially with the simple truth. I mean, I started the simple truth in 2018 when I was of very much a different shaped, like psychically, politically, all these things. And then as we went through the pandemic, my politics really deepened and shifted and changed as I read more books, everything from like in Indigenous Peoples' Histories of the United States of America to even the Howard Zinn, like the original, the People's History. And then there's like books like the Wretched of the Earth, or like even books like Blood in My Eye, or like anything to do with a lot of leftist material, like a lot of these conversations on dialectical materialism and things on like analyzing colonialism and analyzing imperialism, and then analyzing white supremacy, and then looking at Shakespeare and then doing that play, and then in the play like seeing that Antonio was like described as a thief and a pirate, but he rejected both of those terms. I'm not a thief, I'm not a pirate, though Orsino, the Count Orsino, who is the antagonist to Antonio, was describing him this way, and he's like, I'm not these things. And so who is Antonio? So I found Antonio to be something of like a war hero, or something of like a revolutionary, someone who stood up for his country against an insurmountable odds of what I believe is an imperialistic entity that is Illyria. And I invented a country that he was from because it was unnamed, and I called it Bonavia. And I was like, it just kind of came to
Via.
me, Bonavia, and it's like, it doesn't exist
Where
in the central Mediterranean. Technically Illyria is like on the Greek peninsula, and Bonavia is somewhere in there, somewhere around there, somewhere that you need to sail to get to, because Bonavia, and I modeled Bonavia after what I've learned about Algeria, what I learned about Cuba, what I'm seeing about Venezuela, what I'm like, just the colonized world being overborne by the powers of the Imperium in order to acquire resources in order to move their thing. And I was really sort of moved what I learned of the Atlantic slave trade, and knowing that you have to build ships to move these humans as goods. And so it's like, how do you make, what do you need to make ships? You need trees. And so I was like, oh, okay. So the connection between cutting down groves to like dehumanizing people to colonizing is like a direct, like very clear narrative. And so I was like, so what is Europe's relationship to their own sacred groves? And that's where you came in, where you were teaching me about chestnut groves, and you were teaching me about chestnut trees. And I already love trees. I consider myself an elf. Like I just I love nature. I love being around trees. I've been moved by that for a very long time. And my knowledge and learning with you has deepened that relationship in a deep way. And so then I was like, okay, so what if I just started asking questions like, what is this place? Well, there's a forest. And I was like, okay, cool. And how do they protect their forest? And like, why does Illyria want the forest of Bonavia? And then I'm like, it's reminding me of all the things in history, and whether we're doing with oil in the Middle East right now, or in in South America. And it's like, there's a powerful imperial nation that wants resources from a weaker one, and there's a variety of ways to do that. And at the beginning of this play, the king, who was a paragon, who was a very powerful and brilliant strategist and as well as politician, was able to hold at bay Illyria. But this man, one of his final decisions was to, with law, name that the forest was the king's body. And so if anyone were to attack and cut any tree in the forest, they were effectively attacking the king. And of course, this is a very intense and, might I say, possibly it borders on slightly eugenics, or you're trying to alter a single variable and to deal with a systemic issue, right? But like, he tried to do this thing. It ultimately fails, but it brings a point of sovereignty and ecological relationship to bear as the play emerges. So that king eventually dies, and this law continues, and then all of a sudden his son, who succeeds him, becomes this forest, and he has to reckon with both the grief of his father as well as the fact that his body is technically all of these thousands of millions of acres of forest that have been sacred for a while but are now literally his body, and he has to reckon with that. And then he's not the main character. The main character is his sister, the princess, who is beloved of the people, and it's her relationship with this. The play is about what happens when you turn against the systems of power that give you privilege and the consequences of which, and a lot of this thing with the forest and her brother and their mother, who is the queen, like the widower, and the queen, the dowager, and then Antonio is, just like in Twelfth Night, a side character in this, who is a representative of someone who is loyal